Hello everyone. Welcome to the Friday Tech Talk. For today's title, we have uh, jobs in tech you haven't applied for. So today, uh, we have Erik, our co-founder, Tech Academy. So we're going to have an insight into the diverse job options available in the tech industry and learn how to tap into those lesser known opportunities to enhance your career prospect. Erik, take it away.
Excellent. Well, good afternoon, depending on what time zone you're in. I really appreciate you all being here, and I hope we can provide some value today. I'm going to pull up chat real quick, and do me a favor. Let me know in chat if you are currently on the job market or soon will be on the job market. Excellent. Thanks, Henry. Trying to get a sense for where people are at in their journey. So drop into chat if you would. Let me know if you are on the hunt for a job or soon will be. Excellent, Mats. That's great. All right. Thanks, Jack. Gerardo. Okay, good. So good chunk of people. Excellent. Thanks, Lacey. So I hope this is helpful to you. And the reason we're doing this, I'll share my screen in a moment here, just a little bit of context. It's constantly surprising to me, one, how many roles there are that people who can program computers are really good at or would be a great fit for that aren't development roles. And two, how well they pay. And then number three, how often tech people don't know about these roles. So we're going to go over some examples, quite a few actually, and some of them you may have heard of, some of them you might not have heard of, some you might be familiar with, but not, may not realize that they can pay as well as they do, or that your technology skills can be brought to bear in a really valuable way in those roles. So this is by no means, something we're doing to try to encourage you not to be a developer. I think everyone should learn to code. I'm kind of passionate about people learning to program. I just want to illustrate the broad, diverse ecosystem of jobs related to technology that you might want to consider when you hit the market. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Right, that's not what I want. Can you see my slide deck?
Uh-huh.
Excellent.
Yes, Erik.
Okay, good. All right, so the background here is that, and I've done this myself. Many tech workers really just searching for jobs related to the familiar roles that they've seen: engineer, developer, quality assurance, software developer, engineer and test, DevOps engineer, engineer. Okay, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's a lot of room in technology. There's a lot of different roles, but my intention here is to open up your mind a little bit to some of the other possibilities, particularly since in some of these technology adjacent roles, one, they can pay really well, and two, sometimes you can do really well in these roles even at the beginning parts of your career. So you don't have to necessarily settle for less money to get into something that doesn't require 3 to 10 years of engineering experience, which is kind of nice. So we just want to expand your career horizons. Let's talk about technical product managers. Now, a product manager is a role that's been in, broad use in the tech industry for a long time. This subdivision of a technical project manager, first of all, pays really well, right? Secondly, is someone who works directly with the actual team building the product. They work directly with the engineers, the engineering leads, right? The architects, and they are a bridge between the engineering teams that are implementing a design and the business, the executives in the business who are responsible for coming up with, why are we even going to make the product in the first place? How does it serve our clientele and provide value to them? And what's the short-term and long-term financial picture involved in even deciding to build this product? And if you can bridge that gap, you can do really, really well. Some of the skills that can come in handy here are obviously product management skills, right? Which relates closely to project management, but you can almost think of a product manager as a mini entrepreneur. You're responsible for a lot more than just organizing and executing on the project management plan. You're also responsible for things like the full feature set of the product, ideas about marketing it, how to gain initial traction, how to gather feedback as it deploys so that you can iteratively improve it. There's a lot of aspects to this. But if you're familiar with that subject, project management, which frankly an engineer could study and get pretty comfortable with pretty quickly, and you're familiar with the concepts of agile, you'll do really well. But the big one is something that we just blandly put out there: stakeholder communication. What this really means is someone who can see other people's viewpoints really well, make other people feel understood, and can help achieve consensus in the room when there are sometimes conflicting points of view about how a product should move forward in terms of design, promotion, marketing, deployment, maintenance, all sorts of things, right? So if you are a person who builds bridges, who can communicate well, who can make people feel acknowledged and heard and understood, but can have you gather the data, can give a strong, definitive opinion about the right thing to do moving forward, you can do really well in this role. The industries that typically like to hire technical project managers are obviously anybody involved in the SaaS, the software as a service industry. This is like directly either business to business or business to consumer creation of an online hosted service. They need someone to take responsibility for the full product. Fintech is a very dynamic area. Like the idea that banking is boring went out the window about 15 years ago. The financial technology area, or fintech, is a really great place for a technical project manager to work, because people are creating some pretty unique products. And if you don't manage it really well, you can build something that one or two people think is a great idea, but the market itself actually doesn't like, or doesn't think they need, or doesn't find valuable. And a product manager can really help make sure that that doesn't happen. Healthcare also is constantly deploying new products. It's a changing industry, and it's an industry that is finally responding to the fact that they need to approach the consumer and provide helpful products to the consumer. So these are areas you might want to look at. How do you accomplish your transition? Well, obviously you want to leverage your development experience, but you should look into product management courses. They don't need to be extensive. You don't even necessarily need, a full cert in being a product manager. Just get familiar with the concepts, and maybe do a side project where, in addition to running the technology part of the project, you also look into the product management parts of it. That can help you make this transition. Now we'll talk about solutions architects. Love this role. First of all, it pays really well. What do? They design technology solutions for business. This goes far beyond just making a computer program. This involves understanding the existing landscape at the business in terms of what technology systems they already have, and then designing a whole system that'll fit a need for the company that takes into account everything they already have. So a lot of the work here is in analyzing the available offerings for how to create the new system, figuring out the trade-offs that you're going to have to make when deciding how the system is going to be designed, and being an evangelist for this new system inside the company. It can very often involve both development work, but also educational or training work, right? And the skills you're going to bring to bear are obviously cloud computing. Like almost any new broad scale big solution created for a business, it's going to involve the cloud in some way. There's exceptions to that, but they're very rare. You're also going to need to become skilled at software architecture. This is an area that's really a passion of mine. I've been doing a fair bit of training on it recently. It's not something there's a lot of guidance on out there, but if you look hard, you can find it, right? But software architecture is a lot different than software engineering, and understanding both the differences between the two and what are the roles of a software architect can be really, really helpful in this role. And finally, you're going to interface with the client a lot in this role. You need to be someone that's comfortable talking to people at every level of an organization, someone who can do discovery really well, who doesn't like to hear themselves talk, but rather ask questions to get the client talking. These are people that do really well in this role. The industries that hire a lot of solutions architects, cloud services companies, absolutely. Enterprise IT looks for solutions architects because they're looking for how do you create systems that fit into everything we already have inside the company. So this can be an internal role. And obviously consulting. You can actually like become a consulting solutions architect or work for a big consulting company. And you're very helpful to them to do client interaction and discovery and design a system that satisfies the client. Some of the things you might want to consider if you're going to do a transition into this area is get a cert. Get your cloud cert, AWS, Azure. If you hate your life, you can get a Google Cloud Platform certification. Not that I am prejudiced about that. And get yourself involved in some architecture projects, not just engineering or development, the actual overall architecture. And again, this requires you to do a little bit of study on software architecture, but this is how you can transition into this solutions architect role. This one's near and dear to my heart. Salespeople are unbelievably valuable in society. And a pre-sales engineer can be one of the most valuable assets a company has, like incredibly valuable. Before I give you a bunch of data about it, I will tell you that one of the things that a pre-sales engineer has that makes them so valuable is that because the client or the prospective buyer views you as an engineering or technical resource and not really as a salesperson primarily, they are much more inclined to actually listen to what you say and pay attention, and you can give excellent advice and guide them really well without some of that, common distrust of salespeople that happens. So you can be in a position to really, really help your prospective clients. Also, it pays well and very often can involve commission. So if you get really good at it, you can do really, really well. What they do is they support the whole sales process by explaining the technical solutions to clients. And very often they're there on the initial discovery part of the sales process to really understand what the client needs in a way that salespeople who don't have engineering experience really honestly can't. They don't know the right questions to ask. They don't know the hidden gotchas that are going to end up obligating you as a company to delivering stuff that's really expensive or difficult for you to deliver because they just don't know engineering, right? So you can be very valuable in that pre-sales process. Skills that you're going to bring to bear in this role is the ability to do a technical demonstration, to actually guide someone through the use of a product or service in a way they can understand. It requires a lot of empathy, understanding, patience, ability to communicate. You've also got to be very comfortable with client-facing, interactions because you're engaged with them a lot, and you've got to constantly work to have really deep product expertise. You're going to be the subject matter expert. The good news is that most companies don't expect you to have expertise in their product on day one, but you're going to have to be really aggressive when you get the job to learn the product inside and out. So the industries that like to hire pre-sales engineers or sales engineers are the SaaS industries, of course, right? Cybersecurity really likes this because it's very rare for clients to understand cybersecurity really well. And it's also very rare to find cybersecurity experts that are good at sales. In fact, it's one of the areas where there's in the technology industry where there's the most resistance on the part of the subject matter experts to dealing with clients. And so if you can fill that role for a cybersecurity company, you're incredibly valuable. And obviously big enterprise software companies that sell like giant platforms, they definitely have pre-sales engineering very commonly as part of the process. How do you look at doing this transition? Well, you've got to highlight your communication skills or build them if they're not there. As an aside, I recommend this organization and have for like 30 years. If you aren't that comfortable with communication or sales or presentations or speaking, join your local Toastmasters club. It's a nonprofit, been around for over 100 years, that just helps people improve their public speaking and confidence. It's fantastic. I've been involved for a long, long time, and I cannot recommend them highly enough. Check out Toastmasters. Also, there are boot camps that go into sales engineering. As a matter of fact, the Tech Academy has a phenomenal sales boot camp that can absolutely help prepare you for these kinds of roles. Here's another one that I'm very passionate about: a technology evangelist or developer advocate. There's a few different terms that get thrown around. They can pay really well. And what you do as a tech evangelist or a developer advocate is you promote the solutions that your company provides by community engagement. This isn't purely a sales thing. It really is just being the face of the company to the engineering marketplace. If the company you're working for primarily services engineers in one way or another, they would do very well to have a developer advocate. This is someone who works constantly to interface with the development community, can speak at industry events, can create really good getting started guides, can build like reference uses of the technology solution for people to see as an example of what they might do in their company. In other words, make it as easy as possible for engineers who could choose from among a wide variety of potential solutions for a given area, make it really easy for them to pick yours, get started with it, and succeed really quick so that they stick, so they stay, so they recommend to their boss that your solution is the one that we should throw money into, that sort of thing, okay? Skills that you'll bring to bear are public speaking, all right? Content creation is a really big one. This can be video, written, audio, podcasts, mini courses, articles, any kind of thing, right? And you need to be good at software development, because you're not just going to be talking about the solution, you're going to build stuff with the solution that your company sells. And so you need to be good at building stuff and coming up with really cool ways to demonstrate the value of whatever technology it is that your company likes. A lot of people get into this role because they find a company that they're using the services of, and they fall in love with that service and that company. And so they already are walking in the door going, man, I love you guys. I'd love to be your developer advocate. That happens fairly often. Industries that commonly hire technology evangelists or developer advocates are the whole cloud computing arena. Any company is very involved in the cloud. Obviously, developer tools, right? And a lot of the artificial intelligence companies that are promoting products and services that are going to be used by engineering departments, they really like to hire developer advocates. If you're going to look at a transition into this area, then you've got to start doing some of the things that demonstrate the skills on this slide. Your public speaking, content creation, that sort of thing, right? Start a technology blog, speak at meetups, start a video channel on YouTube, right? Engage with developer communities, attend community events, right? And if you are willing to communicate and put yourself out there, and especially, this is the most important part, if you are a deeply curious and interested person, you will get noticed. You will network well, and you can move into this kind of a role. It's a great role for the right kind of person. There's another type of role, which is the data analyst or data scientist, which doesn't involve a lot of coding. This can actually be a pretty interesting area for someone towards the beginning part of their career. It can pay decently well, right? And what do you do in this area? You're going to analyze or visualize business data for insights. Now, part of the reason it's really great to have an engineering background or a software development background when you move into this area is because as programmers, we're so familiar with the concepts of different data types, how they're structured, what behavior they have available to them, and what behavior they don't have available to them. We're also usually pretty skilled at working with broad collections of data, doing queries against that data to show a particular like point of view or insight into the data inside the database. Which brings us to some of the skills you might bring to bear. Obviously, SQL, structured query language, right? Any of the data visualization tools like Tableau or Power BI from Microsoft. And you have to have some skills in statistics. You don't necessarily have to have a statistics degree, but the fundamentals of statistics, which frankly can be learned, in a week if you're going to apply yourself really well, you've got to have those under your belt. Okay. Industries that really like to bring on data analysts or data scientists are finance, healthcare, marketing. A lot of people in the energy sector, like electricity, oil, coal, nuclear power, these kinds of areas. they very often need data analysts. Okay, very usually people that deal with operations at scale, like millions and millions of interactions or records. They've got to have some sort of experts that can help them see what's the story inside of that data. If you're looking at transitioning into this role, you might want to enroll in a data analytics course. We have phenomenal data analytics courses, right? You might want to, do an actual project where you access a large set of data. There's publicly available data sets in a lot of different sectors that governments actually make available, and you can design yourself a little project that you can do that will glean insights from that data and visualize them for people to see. Put it out on GitHub, make a website about it, right? Just to get comfortable with this kind of work and demonstrate that that you've got some competency. Another role, and this is one I actually didn't know existed until about 15 years ago, and I found out one of my best friends from high school, this is what he actually does. Because he would say he worked in UI UX, but I would talk to him about the kind of work he was doing, and it went way beyond just designing the actual interface. People in this space can really make decent money, okay? And what they do is they use user behavior to enhance a product's usability. So what this requires is really deeply understanding your user, an understanding of human nature, behavioral psychology, you might call it, right? It involves the ability to very quickly sketch up or wireframe a different way to interact with the product. They can accomplish the same functionality, but that a user will interface with or interact with differently in alignment with what you've discovered about the users. This is a great role for people that really like to deeply understand others, what motivates them, what they try to avoid. If you're interested, in human nature and also technology, it's a great intersection for you. The kind of industries that really like to bring on UX researchers are technology startups. Really vital for them, if they're smart, to really understand user behavior before they actually spend a ton of investor money building out a product that isn't designed to really match what the way their users think, right? The e-commerce area really likes to work with UX researchers because obviously it's a very competitive landscape, and the better they can understand their clientele and design an interface that completely aligns with the clientele's priorities, the way they like to do business, what their preferences are, makes it easier to consume, easier to work with the company. All these things are really valuable to an e-commerce company. And virtually any SaaS company, especially the business to consumer space, they really want to understand their users and design an interface that makes things super easy for them to use. If you're looking at a transition into this area, you might want to look at some of the research methods. How do we do user research? What are the frameworks around behavioral psychology that end up lending themselves to actually, successfully modifying a user experience? How do you measure? What are the metrics to see whether or not your work is actually succeeding, that you're getting the outcomes that your company wants, right? You could also just do a case study, literally just do a case study on a specific piece of software and do a user research project on it and a recommendation from that, along with some wireframes on how a company might actually modify their user experience for the better and why. Another area, customer success managers. Man, these are some of the most valuable people in a company. So they can earn good money. They are there basically to be a customer's advocate, to make sure the customers actually get value from the product or service that your company is selling. Your company will bring on a customer success manager if they generally when you're providing a relatively complex product or service, one where you're in a competitive landscape, and if you really want to differentiate yourself and not have customer churn or lose customers over time when contract renewal comes up. If you really care about these things, you'll put a customer success manager in who's given, at least temporarily, some broad powers to come in when something goes a little sideways with the customer and just push things through and get problems handled. Okay. You need to be really good at client relations. Data analysis, you're going to be told lots of competing things when you're pulled into a problem with a customer. Sometimes those things are accurate. Sometimes they are an attempt to deflect and get people to look away from an area that's actually responsible for the problem. And so you need to be very logical and look at the actual data and be willing to ask the right questions to get the data you need. And you got to be really good at problem solving and achieving consensus and especially a compromise. These are really, really good skills. Okay. The kind of companies or industries that hire customer success managers are the whole SaaS industry, right? I've worked with a lot of SaaS companies, and all the best ones really have good, empowered, professional, successful customer success managers. Cybersecurity is another big one. Anything in business intelligence is an area where a customer success manager can be a really valuable thing. But lots of different companies like to bring on customer success managers, and if you have an engineering background, you'll do very well as a success manager. How do you look at a transition into this area? You've got to emphasize in your job search when you're interacting with recruiters or hiring managers, any client-facing experience you have. You can do your research, like how do you achieve customer success? How do you achieve effective compromise? How do you handle difficult customers? These are all skills that you can concentrate on. This is the one area of technology that if I could get paid a tremendous amount of money and only do this, this is probably what I'd do. I love to write, okay? It pays decently well, but not great. However, for people that like to write and can write in a clear, concise style, people can understand the point of view of someone who's not yet familiar with the subject you're writing about. It's a phenomenal way to break into technology, okay? What do? You create clear, detailed technical documentation. It can mean a lot of different things. It can be technical documents for the engineering personnel in the company, or it can be technical documents for the consumers of the product or service that your company sells. Skills you need to bring to bear here, obviously technical writing, API documentation. How do you, APIs are only successful if the provider of the API makes it very easy to consume the API. Clear, simple, explicit directions on the API, exactly how to get started, exactly how to do each call, what kind of response you're going to get back, what are the gotchas, what are the things that people need to be worried about if they're trying to interact, right? These are all going into documentation, and it's one of the things that makes an API really valuable. You've also got to be have really good clarity. You've got to be able to get to the heart of something and communicate it well. Industries that like to bring on tech writers, well, lots of them, but in general, any people that are selling software obviously need really good tech documentation. Open source projects are always in need of technical writers and documentation specialists. I did a presentation on how to get started in open source a while ago, and this came up quite a bit, right? SaaS companies, it's huge. You've got to have simple, clear documentation. Again, it's part of that developer advocacy role, and which is why some developer advocates find themselves doing technical writing. You've got to make it as easy as possible to get started with your product. If you're looking to transition into this area, you should actually just do some of it. Develop some documentation samples. Watch that presentation I did on open source and get started on open source with the documentation, because you can point to that on your resume. It's not proprietary. It's totally fine to include it there. Sometimes when you're working for a company, you're doing technical documentation, you might not be able to include the actual documents because they might have intellectual property in them. Open source isn't going to have that, so it's a great way to get started in this area. Now let's look at a business analyst or a BA in the IT space. They can make really good money, okay? What do? They translate business needs into IT solutions. The business, the consumers, the users, both internal and external, are going to say all kinds of things they want software to do. If you, as a business analyst, don't have engineering experience, you're not going to be able to judge whether the ask from the user is going to be really easy to implement in the software or really hard or somewhere in between. And so it makes it really difficult to be a liaison between the end user and the engineering teams if you are a BA, a business analyst. But on the flip side, if you're like the attendees of this class and you've got engineering experience or knowledge, you understand the fundamentals of how computers work, you understand the software development process, how you have to connect separate systems and introduce a code change and get it deployed, all these things, you're going to be able to interact with those business users much more effectively, and you're going to be able to push back or give them some factual, much more accurate data about the trade-offs involved in, I'm sure you'd love to have this feature. In practice, it's probably going to take 2 to 3 months to build that out, not the 1 week that you think it's going to take. And here's why. And on the other side of it, you're going to be able to interact with the engineering folks, and they're going to develop a lot of trust in you because you can speak their language. You understand, what their job is like and what is easy and what isn't. And so you can be a bridge. The skills you're going to need to bring to bear here are process modeling. How do you actually illustrate? How do you communicate in written or graphic form? What does a process look like? What are the stages and what's needed at each stage, and which parts of it can operate independently and which parts of it have dependencies? All these kinds of things are going to be really valuable to illustrate, because you've got to illustrate business processes and think about them also as an engineer. You've got to be really good at working with stakeholders and analyzing, what their needs are, and figuring out the priorities of how do we satisfy the stakeholders and make them happy. And you're going to be want to be good at SQL, because very often as you're doing analyst work, you're going to have to go to existing data, historical records the company has about work it's done in the past, so you can project what might happen in the future, as an example. And this requires the ability to interact with databases. Industries that like to bring on business analysts, and again, there's lots of companies that'll bring on BAs. These are just mentioned as some of the more popular ones: finance, retail, healthcare. They like to bring on BAs all the time. Okay, if you're looking at transition here, you might want to look at some of the business analysis certifications. They're not that difficult to get, right? But project management experience is a huge deal here. Whether it's a free project, like you're doing a volunteer thing you're doing off to the side that you do with a group of people, or whether it's like in your current role, you take on project management responsibility, even if it's not a technology project, those skills will still translate. All right, and let's talk about a cybersecurity analyst, not an engineer, not the person actually building out all the code for cybersecurity, but just an analyst, a way to break into this area, okay? They can make good money. And what they do is to protect company data from cyber threats. Some of it is coding, some of it isn't, right? A lot of it is actually just asking the right questions to figure out what is actually at risk. What are the different ways that people could actually get to our company data? What's the impact for the different types of data that we have if it actually gets compromised? There's some data, if it gets compromised, nobody cares. If it's some marketing collateral that normally you'd like to be able to capture their name and email address before you give them the marketing collateral, and somehow someone gets a hold of it and makes it available without you obtaining their credentials or your name and email, I mean, that sucks, but it's not the same at all as confidential business merger plans that are on an internal company server that some enterprising reporter breaks into your system, gets that data, and publicizes something and ruins a potential merger for the company. That's a much higher impact, as an example. And so you need to be an expert in classification of data, the kinds of ways you would make things safe. You may not necessarily build all of these ways to keep things safe, but you need to understand them. And you need to have some skill in monitoring the networks, because the fact is, you're going to get to, if you're a bad actor, you're going to get to the information you want. We're using this thing called the internet, which is a giant network of connected computers. And so you need to be able to understand a bit about monitoring the network and seeing the traffic that goes back and forth between the computers you have in your company. Industries that very often employ these analysts, especially the entry-level analysts, the government does this a lot. Banking does this a lot, so does healthcare, okay? But you'll find these kinds of roles in a lot of different industries. If you're planning this kind of a certification, you can get them with simply having a bootcamp graduate, certification. In particular, of course, we have our cybersecurity bootcamp, which would absolutely prepare you for this or even higher roles. But you can also look at getting a Security Plus certification. CEH is another, security cert. You can actually practice ethical hacking. You have to be very careful with this. You've got to get permission from the owners of the system you're trying to break into, but you can, study the protocols for how to do an actual ethical hacking, test, and get permission to do it. Do the actual test and write up all of your findings. If you've got a company that'll let you do that, it's really valuable to them. They find out where they're at risk, where the attack vectors that could be successfully exploited are inside their systems, and they can work at hardening those and improving the security, and you get a real world project that can be put on your resume, which is really cool. So I know we covered a lot. I'm actually going to go right back up to the top here, and I just want to review the titles. I want you to be able to get them succinctly, okay? So go back to the top here. Technical project manager, solutions architect, pre-sales or sales engineers, technology evangelist or developer advocate. Again, you'll find a few different names for this role. Data analysts or data scientists, where the role doesn't require a lot of coding. It's a great place to get started if you're new in your career. UX researchers, that intersection of human psychology and user interfaces and user experience. Customer success managers, the people that really help ensure that your clientele get the most out of the product or service your company provides and can help handle emergencies. Tech writers and documentation, love that. Business analysts and cybersecurity analysts, entry level. So I hope this has been helpful. I know it's going to have a whirlwind tour through it, but I just want to, and again, there's even more, right? If you keep searching around, you'll find these roles where an engineering background, the ability to program, the ability to, if you understand the software development life cycle, if you, actually gone through working on a live, electronic system, a live computer program as part of a team, all these things can be brought to bear and make you really valuable in roles where your primary responsibility is not coding, but one of these other areas. So let me go ahead and go back to, where is it? Stop sharing. I'm going to go look at the chat now. Okay. Anybody have questions? Drop them into chat. Totally fine. I'll give a few minutes to answer anything that people have. Can anybody think of other roles that they've seen that are technology adjacent that they're intrigued by or had questions about? Okay, cool. All right. Well, I'm going to be here until we finish up. And if you think of any other questions, you want to drop them in the chat, totally fine. Otherwise, I'll hand it back over to the organizers. Oh, wait. Gerard has got a question. Thanks. For most of these jobs, where would a good place to look for these jobs or roles be? There's two things on that. One, Indeed is great in terms of keywords. You could take this presentation, because again, it's going to be up on our YouTube channel, within 24 hours. Okay. You take this presentation and whatever those roles are that you like, you'll find things with that or similar wording on Indeed. Indeed's great. Okay. Also, you could find technology recruiters who specialize in one or more of those areas. Yes, they might place the occasional direct engineer, but there are people that really love to specialize in cybersecurity. That's all they do. There are people that specialize in technical documentation and writing. Okay, so if you find a specialized recruiter for the areas that you really like, that's another great place, because they might have access to jobs that aren't very commonly listed because of their deep experience in network connections. Jackass, is creative engineer a role? I haven't heard anything with that exact description. If you don't mind, Jack, because we've got a little time here, if you could drop into chat what your concept of that role is. What does a creative engineer look like or do? How does it differ from a regular engineer? There may be a different way of referring to it that I've seen, but I'd love to find out a bit more. I love the name, creative engineer. I think it's great. Oh yeah. Henry says you mentioned some sort of club or program called Toastmasters. Um, can you speak more to that? You can go to Toastmasters International. Just Google that, okay? And they're active in like 100 or 150 countries, and it's literally just a nonprofit that was created to help people improve their public speaking ability and their self confidence. It's got a very stable, established program on how to do that. That's very effective. I will say this: probably the thing I'm most appreciated about it was that when you get into the program, obviously you're going to be doing a lot of public speaking. The primary course that you go through on it, again, it's a nonprofit. It's super inexpensive. Okay, the primary course or program certification program you go through, you're going to do at least 10 presentations in front of other members of the group, each one with a different focus. For example, there might be one where all you're really focusing on is eliminating filler words like or ah or these things that can easily drop into your speech and can be very distracting to the listener. So you might be doing, a speech on one of those specific skills. And when you're done, you're going to get feedback from the rest of the group. And this is the part I love the most about my experience with Toastmasters, among many things that I appreciated. When you get feedback, there's a specific protocol for how feedback is given that it's very simple. It's not like this is rocket science, but it's used consistently and it's super effective. It's the sandwich. Cover things that the person did really well. Genuinely acknowledge what they did really, really well at. Point out some areas that could be improved, and then wrap it up with something else they did that was really genuinely great and awesome. And I know it sounds super simple, but when you combine it with the fact that you're also in the room where everyone else is to one degree or another frightened or anxious or worried about public speaking, they're all in the same boat and they will never, ever make you wrong or try to embarrass you or scoff or say anything negative. It's a very, I know it sounds all wishy-washy. It's a safe space. And let's acknowledge the fact that public speaking can be incredibly frightening to people. So when I found it 25 years ago, I heard about it 30 years ago, finally joined a club in 2000, and I fell in love because I could finally have a space where it was okay if I messed up, said something, stumbled over my words, didn't make a point very well, forgot what I was going to say, had to look at my notes, all these things. And the anxiety slowly dropped to the point where I'm comfortable speaking in front of anyone now, but it was not that way. And Toastmasters helped me a lot. So I hope that helped. Okay. Um, that's totally fine, Jack. I'll look it up a little bit too. Jobs posted on job boards are typically potential solutions to as of yet not vetted problems or unvetted problems. What is often missing is what gap or problem the org is trying to solve. Art, I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. That's a phenomenal observation. I'm going to read this again. Jobs posted on job boards are typically potential solutions to as of yet unvetted problems. What's often missing is what gap or problem the org is trying to solve. You're totally spot on. And when you're communicating with, even in that initial like screening call, but especially with hiring managers or internal recruiters, that's one of the most important things to ask about. What is it that's motivated this job requisition? Why was the role created? What kind of an outcome are you, the company, what are you hoping to see if you bring on the right person? How will it change things? What's the benefit? It's a fantastic point. Very often the listings are very dry, and you're right. They just know there's a problem like, oh, we've got a bunch more initiatives coming up in the second half of the year, and we don't think we have sufficient engineers to support them. So we better bring on some more engineers. Well, what kind? I don't know. Just full stack developers. Like it can be kind of vague like that. But when you ask those questions, when you're actually interested in that, one, you'll get answers to questions that you would want to know to see whether or not the place is a good fit for you. But two, it demonstrates to them that you're a curious, interested individual and you care that the work you're brought on to do actually is going to help. It's not just an exercise in, okay, I've got a job. Isn't that great? You want to make a difference. So love that point, Art. It's fantastic. Okay, cool. I think I've taken up enough time. I'll continue to watch the chat, but now I will turn it back over to the organizers. Thank you all so much for the questions.
Okay. So if there's any more questions, you can still drop it in the chat. And yeah. So thank you everyone for attending today's Tech Talk, and a big thank you to our speaker, Eric, for sharing his knowledge and expertise with us today. It's really, really helpful for our graduates and everyone in here. So we host Tech Talks like this one every Friday at 1 p.m. Pacific time. And in addition to these talks, we also offer other programs like our Tech Accelerator program, which is an advanced program that offers hands-on learning with more than 100 educational videos and live a weekly session every Tuesday. So you can email us at accelerator@learncodinganywhere.com for more information. I'm just going to send it on the chat. And yeah. So again, thank you again for joining us today, and we hope to see you at our future events. Still Friday, 1 p.m. And yeah. Is there any announcement for you, Eric? Or
I mean, I can't let the opportunity go by without capitalizing on it to promote the accelerator. I love delivering the accelerator. There are very few teaching engagements I get to do where I can have completely open chat, open video, back and forth dialogue, and the most important thing, that I don't have to hold back on the depth of how much we provide in terms of the training. When I'm doing any kind of introductory training, it's the right thing to do. I've got to shape what we're presenting to just concentrate on the fundamentals. But when we do the accelerator workshops, we can go super deep into real world projects, real world code, build things, break them, see what the job's actually like, explore really interesting areas. So if you're really interested in literally accelerating your career, join the accelerator, join me Wednesday or Tuesday nights when we do the workshops. Tell me what you want to learn about, because I'll teach to whatever you guys need, guys and girls need. Absolutely love the accelerator. Love to see you there.
okay, great. So again, thanks again for joining us today, and we hope to see you at our next events. Bye, everyone.
Bye all. Thanks.